What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 521. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and, well, I'm flying solo this time. This doesn't come up very often, but Luis had some kind of urgent plans come up, and, well, I thought about grabbing a guest. I'm at the Mythic Championship, but at the time of recording, it's like right before, the night before the tournament starts. And I realized that trying to grab somebody who was playing in the event was probably a no-go. I remember they're trying to get extra rest or any extra testing time or scouring the deck lists or whatever it is they're trying to do. Means that, you know, asking them to come and do a podcast on that particular night is not, it's just not really going to happen. And I've done a couple with the coverage crew before. I thought about bugging them, but they also have to get up early and work and all that. And it's like, you know, a little bit last minute. But then I remembered something that I had an idea for. And that is, well, to fly solo, which is a little rough, but to do an AMA. So, you know, a little bit more focused on me specifically. And that's what we're going to do on the show this week. Before we get into that, of course, I got to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check out Channel Fireball for everything you need Magic related, including the Magic newsletter. You can go to channelfireball.com/newsletter and check out any of up to three newsletters, one of them from Luis Scott-Vargas every week. That's kind of like whatever's on his mind, you know, modern, or I should say current era stuff, as well as one from Matt Nass about Modern and Pioneer, and one on Commander from the Raging Levine, Eric Levine. So you can check those out at channelfireball.com/newsletter. And then also, got to thank you. Via the Patreon, if you want to support the show, it is easy to do. Patreon.com/limited resources. And in fact, all of the questions that I'm going to be answering on the AMA for this episode are from patrons. So that's one of the cool things that you get for being a patron, is that I often will tap our most dedicated listeners via our Patreon community for questions for guests, or in this case for me. And again, we just try to find all the little ways, you know, to give back. And that's one of the ways to do so. And of course, I've said it before and I'll say it again because it's really true. We really do appreciate everybody that supports us on Patreon. It means a lot on a personal level, but also it enables the show, you know, to keep going, to do the things that we want to do with it. And we wouldn't be able to do it without you. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to skip Crack-a-Pack this week because, well, Eldraine's been out forever, and it's a little less fun when we can't bounce ideas off of each other anyway. And I'm going to get right into the questions. So again, I posted on the LR Patreon, and I said I was thinking about doing an AMA myself from the hotel room, which is exactly what's happened here. I'm in the hotel room, and gonna answer as many of these questions as I can before I have to go to sleep, because I got to get up early to do coverage tomorrow here at Mythic Championship 7. So let's get into the questions. The first one comes from Matt, who says, "Hey, Marshall, I'm still indebted to LSV for sharing his steak recipe a while back." I remember that one. I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite way to prepare a steak? And I have two, but the way that I end up doing it most commonly, especially now because I don't have a grill, you know, an outdoor proper kind of grill thing, is and I think this is very similar to the way that Luis did it, but I'll say it just in case it's any different at all. But it's probably similar, which is I've got these frying pans that are they're all stainless steel, right? So you can put them in the oven. They're bulletproof, basically. They might actually be bulletproof. And you heat them up pretty dang hot, and you put some butter in, and that will provide a nice surface for you to put like a crust on the steak, basically. Sear it, they call it. So you put the steak in it on that and heat it up for a while until it gets kind of released back from the pan and it gets that kind of brownish thing going on. You flip it over to do that again at very high heat on the stovetop. And then you take the whole thing, including the pan, and you put that in the oven and you cook it until your desired temperature. And I actually use one of those thermometers that you can stick it in there, and then it has like a wire that comes out to the thermometer outside of the oven, and I keep an eye on it like that. My other way is I got one of those sous vide cookers. If you've ever seen those, they're the things that like heat up water to a specific temperature. And this one's kind of in reverse. In a sous vide cooker, you put the steak in like a Ziploc bag with olive oil, salt, and pepper. And then, you know, if you want other stuff like thyme or garlic or whatever, you can do that too. And then you put that in the water after it's heated up, and it heats the steak to exactly the temperature that you set it at. So if you like a medium rare, you set it at medium rare temperature, and boom, you get it up to that. And then you sear it after that, because, you know, when you cook it in effectively in water, I mean, it doesn't give it much texture. So you want to try to sear it. And I do it the same way. I put some butter in the pan, really hot, and then, you know, give it a few, you know, not even that long, 30 seconds on each side or something like that. And it comes out really good. It really does. And then you also kind of let it sit for a little while and then slice it. I really like that. Next one comes from Alexander, who says, "Hey, Marshall, I'm curious, how do you take your coffee?" Uh-oh. I don't drink coffee. It's interesting. I don't drink, I don't know how to put it. I don't use caffeine, maybe is the way to put it. I don't like wake up in the morning and think, okay, I got to have my Red Bull or my coffee or whatever. I don't not drink caffeine though. Like my favorite drink by 1,000 miles is an Arnold Palmer, which is half tea, roughly half. I actually don't do half, but whatever. The standard issue recipe is half tea and half lemonade. And, you know, it's iced tea. It's brewed black tea. So it has a little bit of caffeine in it. I mean, it has not that much. And in fact, when I make my Arnold Palmers at home, which I do, the tea that I use, I brew it, is actually a decaf tea. And the reason for that isn't because I'm like trying to avoid caffeine that hard. Like whenever I go to a restaurant, I'm just like, give me an AP, and I don't have any problem with it. It's because I drink so much of it that I just don't want to drink that much caffeine just because I'm thirsty. So I actually changed it and went to decaf. But yeah, I don't like coffee. I never have. I figured out some stuff. It's kind of interesting. As you get older and you kind of get used to like how you are, you know, I looked up some stuff online and everything, and I realized that I think they call it a super taster, and there's a few different kind of categories of this, and it's people that are really sensitive to certain types of tastes. And I found one that was people that were super sensitive to like bitterness. And it's like they put a list of foods and drinks and stuff up, and it said, if you don't like these things, you're probably somewhere in this group, you know, where you're more sensitive to these flavors. And man, right down the list, I couldn't, you know, it was grapefruit. I can't even eat grapefruit. Like when I eat grapefruit, I don't understand how people can palate it because it's so bitter to me. And most beers are like that. Coffee's like that for me too. And there's some other stuff. And I realized then I'm like, oh, like it's not because, you know, usually people tell you, oh, well, when you get older, you'll develop a taste for it, or it's an acquired taste. And that actually has happened to me for most of the things that like I didn't think I would like at one point in my life. And now I do. But the bitter stuff, I haven't ever really been able to get over it. And then the other thing is that I really don't like being reliant on caffeine or stuff like that. Like I don't like that idea where I'm just like not a human being until I get my caffeine. It's just like annoying habit. And also, you know, they've done a lot of studies on caffeine, and while it's not like, you know, devastating for you, it's not great for you. It affects your sleep. Like it's just something that like, since I've made it this far without doing it, I'm like, I'm just going to, you know, not become one of the coffee drinker, you know, types or whatever. But I will tell you, I absolutely love the smell of coffee. So it is kind of funny, even though I don't actually drink it myself. But I got to say, if you're listening to this right now, you can't tell anybody I said that, because I live in Seattle and it's like a absolute crime to not drink coffee. So yeah, it's between you and I. This next one comes from Cody, who says, overall, I was just curious about how you feel about Eldraine as a set. I've had a tough time enjoying it as a limited format. It's awkward to draft, but I really love the way it plays well with others building standard decks. Yeah, you know, we're going to do the Throne of Eldraine Sunset show, and I'll give you a more in-depth, you know, Luis and I will give you our thoughts more in depth. But overall, yeah, it's been fine. I like the things I like about it are that it's balanced and it's interesting. It's a pretty deep format. The adventure mechanic is a mechanic I like a lot. But I also haven't really fallen in love with it. Like, this is not one of those formats where I'm just like excited to draft it every time. I've drafted it and enjoyed it, and I'm like, sure, thumbs up. You know, it's balanced enough and it's got enough going on that I'm okay with it. But, you know, there isn't really one deck that I'm in love with. I like the blue-black deck, but there isn't like that one, you know, the Risen Reef, or the thing that just really jumps out to you like, oh, I want to do that, or oh, I opened a whatever. There's a few things that I like, but none of them that really jump out. So I don't know. I think it's good. I give it a thumbs up, but I'm not in love with it, is how I'd say it. Ian says, what would your autobiography be called? I have to title my autobiography. I don't know. I'm reading an autobiography right now by a watchmaker that I really respect. He passed away in 2011, but his name is George Daniels. And, you know, I Luis teases me a little bit about it on the show, but I actually am. It is actually a passion of mine. Watches and horology, like the study of time and how to track it and that kind of stuff. And his autobiography is called All in Good Time, Reflections of a Watchmaker, which I thought was a really good title. And I unfortunately do not have anything close to that cool of an idea off the top of my head, Ian. Next one comes from Atticus, who says, what's it like being on the road so often for coverage? Is it hard being away from home, or do you like it? Any interesting coping mechanisms? Also, do you bring any decks or magic paraphernalia with you wherever you go? What's it like being on the road? It sucks. It kind of sucks. It's interesting because I actually really love to travel. And before I did coverage, I used to travel on my own a lot. Like I would save up all my money. I worked at the grocery store and I would just spend it all traveling. I went to Africa, went to Europe a bunch of times. I did photography and stuff because that's a thing that I love. And I really loved it. But when you travel for work, it is much different. The cliche that you'll hear from people, but like many cliches is true, is that it really feels like you're going from like an airport to an airplane to a hotel room to a convention center and then just repeat that loop. You're not really seeing the city. You're not really enjoying it or relaxing. You do get a vibe for the cities that you're in. It's not like you're in them to a point. But, right now I'm recording this from Los Angeles. I'm in my hotel room just recording, and you definitely get used to it. I have for sure. The thing that actually is the hardest for me and that I've really come to just like, is the sleep. You can read these studies, and there's been so many studies about sleep and how important it is. It's really, really important for good health and for mental health and all the things that are so important for like day-to-day, stuff. And they even done studies that say that your sleep is important for your long-term health, that you can reduce your chance of getting, the more chronic diseases and stuff by getting better sleep. And on the importance of keeping a circadian rhythm. Now mine is way off. If left in one time zone, I will naturally drift towards about 2 to 3 a.m. is when I go to sleep, and then I get up at like 9 or 10. And that's fine. I can be fine with that. But when you travel, especially over multiple time zones, it just knocks that whole thing out. And that's a hard thing. For me is that I just feel like it's a health hit. It just makes you feel bad and you have to recover from it. And it's just, it gets harder and harder as time goes by. Beyond that, I don't mind it so much. You really do get used to most of the stuff. And, you end up getting, if you travel with the same airline enough, you get enough points that you kind of get this status where like you don't really have to wait in lines that long. And you get a lot of upgrades to first class or things like that to make it more comfortable. To help kind of ease that burden. I moved a few years back so I could be closer to the train in Seattle that takes you to the airport, so I didn't have to fight traffic, which is a big unknown, and of course where you park your car and how much that all costs and all that. Now it's just like a few bucks and a little over half an hour and I'm at the airport, and it just ticked that off. So those are some of the coping mechanisms. Do I bring any decks or magic paraphernalia? Not anymore. I used to bring my draft stuff, so like my lands and my sleeves and a deck box and some dice and stuff, because the coverage team used to do live drafts all the time. But at some point, going back to the sleep thing, that caught up with me enough that I said, look, I need to decide between taking care of myself or doing a draft. And I get to draft a lot, right? Like I draft at home, I draft on Magic Online, I draft on Arena. And even though my favorite people to draft with are my coverage friends, you got to be a professional at some point. And I just realized that there were times when I was getting too tired. And so I cut that out. And ever since I did, I haven't really brought my stuff. If I want to play, the most common way we'll play now is to get online, either on Magic Online or Arena, and we'll all kind of huddle around a screen and yell at each other over which picks we should have taken or something like that. So that's the closest that I get now. Alan says, hey, Marshall, your Humans of Magic episode was really interesting. Thanks for putting yourself out there and opening up. Thank you. I can put a link to that in the show notes as well, if I remember. Feel free to skip this question if it's too personal, but he did say anything goes, which I did. Do you find it hard to maintain a long-term romantic relationship when you travel so much? Love everything you do for the Magic community. Keep it up. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, it is hard, actually. It's actually quite hard. I've been in a long relationship, but like right now, we're not really together. And a lot of that is because of travel, I think. Just not being there, throws the rhythms off and cuts out so much stuff that I've actually been trying to rebalance back in the other direction And partially that's why, because, I don't want to lose relationships over stuff. But, I'll tell you, it is a really tough business to be, into, a contractor or a person who's just sort of like, I don't have like the specific set job, right? And anything goes, everything changes. And, it does get actually quite difficult, because you don't want to say no to work, because sometimes there are 6 months where there's really nothing. And, if you're sitting at home, you might not recognize that, but like, that's 6 months that you don't get back. Right. And so you have to, you really feel this pressure all the time to say yes to everything and to do everything. And that's kind of like why I go back to the Patreon, right? Like that's having things like the Patreon helps you be more stable, and the support of people like you that listen to the show, helps us live a more balanced, healthy life where we can approach things from a more reasonable standpoint rather than, yes, I will say yes to everything. Because if you take on a life like this as a contractor of any sort, not just in Magic, but anywhere, you have to accept certain things. You have to accept that you do not have the solid, every 2 weeks a paycheck shows up and it's the same exact amount. And you're just like, yep, that's what I make. And, you can plan your life that way. It doesn't work like that. And so I knew that going in. I don't have any illusions about it, but you do want to get some semblance of stability around you. And that can sometimes be difficult. So yeah, relationships can be tough. Financial stuff can be tough just when it's inconsistent, when it's travel. So I've been trying to balance out a little bit and do a little bit less travel each year, without giving up too much. And I'm still trying to find that and still struggling, to be honest. Matthew says, when will we get to buy some more LR deck boxes? Yeah. So we had a huge run of them. And I think they've been sold out for a while now. We used them, CFB and I, they wanted to use them at GPs, because sometimes for some of the events, they'll do those giveaways. And when you sign up for a GP, you'll get a deck box and a, paper and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was really cool of them, because it's awesome for me too, because like it would be like a limited GP and they're using the LR deck boxes, which is just cool personally, but also, it's cool to get the word out, right? What is this? Maybe I should listen to this, that kind of thing. And so I thought that was really cool of CFB. The downside is that we've now ran out, and I've been looking at potential options for merchandising, some more stuff, some shirts and some stuff like that, if people would be interested. And deck boxes may be part of that, or they may go through CFB, but it's just tricky because you have to get such a quantity of these things. It's insane. I did this when I did the Kickstarter way back in the day before Patreon existed. And it was like, I did it so wrong. Like I did an order, and then I ended up having to order more, which is really inefficient because if I would have ordered them together, they give you a better price. And then I had to do another order after that because I just didn't know what to expect. And it cost I had to pay all this money. It was like, oh my God, to try to figure out this stuff. And, I was in uncharted territory, right? And that's just how that worked. But it did teach me that you need to get big quantities. And that's kind of the thing here. So I have to work it out with them or with a third party or whatever, but hopefully. Michael asks, what's your favorite non-cardboard related pastime? I have a few. Basketball is probably number one. I play 2 to 3 times a week. I'm in a league and a few like regular games in Seattle. It's been my passion since it was really the first thing that I cared about, like, besides like people or whatever. It was the number one. And I've played not quite nonstop. There was a break that I had where I wasn't really playing, but for the last, 8-9 years, again, I've been playing and I play as often as I can. I basically just want to keep playing as long as I can, and I want to play as often as I can while I can still play. Because, at some age it starts to become, pretty annoying and you don't really want to do it anymore. But now I'm still super into it. I look forward to it all the time. So that's probably my number one. Photography is a big one for me. I've done it for a really long time. I actually have an Instagram that I will put up some of my photos on now. That's not really Magic related, but I do have my Magic credentials. So I guess it's Magic-y enough. So I like doing that. Photography is a big one for me. And then the other one I mentioned earlier is watches. I'm into vintage watches, like old watches, basically. And the story behind that is pretty simple. But basically, me and my dad was a huge car guy, a huge car person. He was a mechanic. He was on a racing car team. Like he was one of the people that worked on the car. And I got really into cars too. And, you know, I grew up around them that was my dad. On my mom's side of the family, my uncle was a race car driver. My other uncle was the pit crew for his, for his brother's team. My stepdad owned one of the race cars. My grandpa was on the rules board, if you will, for the racetrack. So, you know, every holiday that I've been when I was young, there was always a race on TV. It's just a kind of a way of life with the cars. And it was something that me and my dad did. Well, unfortunately, my dad passed away, it's weird to say it, but it's actually been about 5 years now, even though it doesn't feel like it. And I live in an apartment and stuff. I don't have a garage or tools. And I miss working on stuff like that, but I don't want to get a full garage and a project car and all this crazy stuff. And I realized that the watches actually kind of filled that role for me. Also, that was something that me and my dad were both into. So I kind of carried that along as well. And I realized, well, I can start working on these things and taking them apart and doing that kind of stuff. And so I've been doing that. I took classes online to learn how to work on them properly and that kind of stuff. And I've been picking up tools here and there. And I actually even started a YouTube channel for it for fun. And I can put a link to that too. It's called Wristwatch Revival. I don't really know what I'm doing with it. I just have an idea I have a few ideas for it, and I've put up a couple of videos so far, but I'm not really committing to it as some like big endeavor. I'm just doing it because I like making videos and I have the setup for it. And I like, you know, bringing people into a hobby. That's one of the big things I like about my position in Magic. And when it comes to other stuff, I want to try to do that as well. Plus, I think it's just good for me to be able to kind of do the content creation thing outside of the Magic sphere. Where I'm at in Magic, it can be kind of hard for me to, I don't know. Sometimes I go onto Twitter and I'm just like, I don't want to say anything. Like, I don't want to get, you know, yelled at. I don't want to have some huge conversation that I feel like I have to then attend to. I don't want to get canceled or something if I say the wrong thing. It's just, there's just a lot of sort of baggage around that, given, you know, like what I do and what my position is there. And so I wanted to start something that was completely separate from that. And that I just didn't really have any, you know, I mean, I have freaking 5 followers on that Instagram for that thing. I've got like 3 subscribers or whatever on the channel. And I've made a couple of videos and they have like 10 views. And I'm like, oh, this kind of feels cool. You know, it's like building, you know, it's just completely out of my, my normal space. And I mean, I'll probably tweet about it just in case any of my followers or whatever are into watches. But that's my other big, you know, non-Magic, pastime is watches, photography, basketball, and then food. I love food too. Nick says, hey, Marshall, got a good MTG and basketball crossover question here. Ooh, which current NBA players do you think fit into each of the color pie? Who are the Wooberg starting 5? Happy holidays. That's great, Nick. I love that. So I don't want to put too much thought into it because I think it'd be more fun if I did it off the top of my head. So let's just do it. White, I'm going to say Luka Doncic. Blue, I'm going to say LeBron James. Black, who's the kind of evil maybe or got some ideas or something like that? I'll go with Russell Westbrook. No. Russell Westbrook is going to be red. Yeah. Black, we'll go with Kyrie Irving. And green, I'll go with Al. Green. Who's green in the NBA? Who's kind of the... I'll go with Karl Anthony Towns for green. I think he seems like a nice guy. That was a good one. Matthew says, why do you think Wizards feels the need to make organized play so complicated? Do you have a simpler solution for this system? Fantastic. I really love that you put these 2 questions together, Matthew, because it's really important to be able to talk to both. I'll answer the second one first. Do I have a simpler solution? No, absolutely not. So when you're in my seat, right, where I'm covering these tournaments, so I'm working alongside Wizards of the Coast employees, and I'm working on the tournaments as well. And you see the level of insane effort and everything that goes into making these things and all the bases that they have to cover and all the considerations that they have to do. It is mind-boggling. It is every time you think you have the right idea. I've been in this seat, by the way. And I go, well, why don't we just do it this way? They go, well, what about this? or this doesn't serve this group of people, or this isn't fair, right? Like to some group or whatever. And you're like, oh, right, I didn't think about that. That wouldn't be right at all. And they have to consider all of the things and still come up with a system. Where if I come up and say, well, why don't we just do it this way? And they go, well, players from Europe and Asia and everywhere else but North America would have no chance in that system whatsoever, right? And even though the system is naturally skewed towards North Americans because that's where the most players are, I don't think that they want to have, they don't want to exasperate that, right? Well, I get to say, oh, okay, my idea didn't work. But I don't have a deadline, right? I don't have to actually still come up with something after that. They do. They absolutely do. So that's why it ends up being so complicated in the end, is they're trying to serve a lot of different needs at once. And this is the best way that they've come up to do it. And the thing that I always commend them on is, look, it is really tough to stick the landing on this stuff on the first try, but they're always willing to listen to feedback from the players and the community and then make adjustments. Now, sometimes those adjustments take longer than the players in the community want, and I totally get that. But you also have to remember that Wizards of the Coast is a corporation, and they don't move at lightning speed. They just don't. I mean, it's like I wish they did too, but it's just, things have to get approved. Budgets have to happen. It has to be somebody's responsibility. Maybe a new position needs to be open. All of these things end up having to happen, and and that can kind of slow things down a little bit. But yeah, it is crazy, but the system, it needs to be complicated because it has to fill so many different things from tournament fairness to different regions to player types to marketing reasons. I mean, there's so many things that go into these systems, fitting into a budget and all that. Andy says, do you have any comment or opinion on MTG players who ask their opponents for a concession before they start a match? I do. Under the current rule scheme, that's completely legal to do, and I have no issue with players doing it. I wish it weren't legal or possible or encouraged. I don't think it's encouraged. Allowed. I don't know how to put it, but I wish it wasn't a thing. And Andy's referring to, if you play at a paper Magic tournament and you sit down from somebody, you are allowed to say, will you concede to me? And the other person can say yes. And then they can scoop up their card, sign the match slip, and they have the right to do that currently. And you might be wondering, well, why would you care? Who cares? But, for the most part, it's because it's mutually beneficial to both players to do so. And that's why you don't want to try to put in arbitrary rules to force people to try to work around those rules. You just say, look, if one person doesn't want to play, they can say, I don't want to play, right? And I'm going to concede to you. Maybe they just have to leave. Right? What are you going to do? Punish somebody because they're like, I have to go catch my flight or I had an emergency, right? It's, there's really no way to police that properly. And that's why the rules exist the way they are and why I don't have a problem when people do it. But it does just go against some weird inner feeling of fairness, or I don't know. It feels unsportsmanlike on some level. Like there's just no other sports, right? Like imagine if you watch your two favorite football teams and one was like, well, we're just going to lose to you on purpose because it actually benefits both of us. You'd be like, what? Like, that's not how these sports work. Like you get out there and you play, right? Like you have to get out and play. And in a perfect system, the players would always be incentivized to play so that these situations would never come up. But there is no perfect system, and this is one of the things that slips through. Harry says, hi, Marshall, longtime listener, first-time caller. Welcome, Harry. If we're allowed to talk about a cube, if you were designing a 4-color cube, which color would you cut and why? How do you feel about oppressive cards like Mind Twist, Opposition, Stacks, or Winter Orb? Do these cards add more feel-bad moments than they do fun? I would cut white for sure from the cube. It's almost always a support color unless it's pushed really hard as a mono color. And then if it's pushed really hard as a mono color, I don't know. Most of the people that I know that like cube like to do splashier, more fun stuff than just like, here's a bunch of creatures, beat you down with them. And look, I don't take anything away from people that do, but most people that are like, have been playing cube for a while aren't really all about that mono white. So I would cut it. I generally don't like the oppressive cards, mainly because of what you said, feel bad moments and they do fun. Yeah, I just think that they're unfun. Like Smokestack, Winter Orb, are not fun. Now, cards like Opposition, I don't mind as much, even though they're oppressive when they actually go. They do require actually some work. You have to put a bunch of creatures in your deck. It's a double blue card, which, the natural pairing is like blue, and green so that you can play elves and ramp out to your opposition. And yeah, it's not fun once it's on the battlefield. But, your opponent does get to play instant speed stuff still. To me, that's the kind of card I could keep. Mind Twist I could take or leave. It's a little too powerful, but as long as it's on par power level wise, I could be fine with it. But Winter Orb and stacks and stuff like that, you just don't get to play Magic. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? Like, I don't like that at all. So I would kill those. Charlie says, if you were given a boat that had to be christened, what would you name it? I would obviously name it the Man of War. Come on. Matt says, how is your jump shot? Who's the NBA comparable for Marshall when you're playing ball? Oh, that's great. My jump shot is probably my strongest attribute as a player, especially now. I shoot threes a lot. That's kind of my specialty, but I try to be able to do everything on the court. That's kind of how I've built my game, but my jump shot is definitely good. In fact, I once won a bet. It was actually a free throw bet, so not quite a jump shot, but still a shot. And the bet was a little bit convoluted, and we had all these crazy rules around it, and it had a really long lead up time too, because it was from a bunch of poker players. And at any rate, I needed to make 10 free throws in a row in this sort of convoluted sequence, and I just made the first 10. I just walked off. I was like, done. That was great. Who's my NBA comp? I would say like Dirk Nowitzki, like, is who I would like try to be, kind of like, especially at this point, like old Dirk. Like, me and Dirk are the same age. So, but like, basically I'm tall, but I can shoot, which isn't a thing that is normally the case. But nowadays I'm pretty slow and like, not really doing a whole bunch of athletic stuff like I used to. Michael says, how much poker do you play these days? Almost zero. I've really phased it out for the most part. As I was able to focus more and more on Magic stuff, that's where I wanted to put my time. And then at some point, the thought of just running down to the casino to play a few hands didn't really appeal to me, because I still view it kind of like a job, like when I was playing full time. And it's really hard to separate myself back out. The time when I am able to do that is when we do it locally. My friend Adam, or my buddy Adam, as I often call him, we have a poker game that used to run every single week, but now it doesn't. Now it runs every few months. But there's some of our old school poker friends in there, and then also a bunch of Magic players. And that is really fun. I love playing in that game because the players are actually pretty good. And so it's challenging, but also it's just like fun to talk with everybody about sports and Magic and stuff like that. Brandon says, well, I understand why they stopped. I still really miss the GP videos from the breakdown. Any plans to do anything like them in the future? Yeah, and I'll mention that again here. He's referring to MTG Breakdown, my YouTube channel, which is currently basically on pause or hold or on the back burner. And just a quick explanation. Brandon knows this, but the reason why I haven't been making them is because they drastically changed the travel schedule for us. We don't do GPs anymore. It's that happened. And that was where I was doing the majority of my vlogs. Incidentally, that is also where I recorded the majority of my rewinds. Those are the videos where I sat down with a pro player and went over like an iconic match from their career and got to ask them questions and relive it with them. And I really loved doing both of those types of videos. In fact, those are the two types of videos that I wanted to make when I started the channel. But now that the travel for that kind of stuff is reduced so much, and a lot of my travel is for Mythic Championship level events, a lot of them, like right now I'm in Long Beach. I was here, 4 or 5 weeks ago to do Mythic Championship 5. It's kind of the same stuff. All my MPL weekly coverage that I did was all in the same studio. It's all, LA, get off the plane, do the thing, next morning go home, or get there that night, wake up, do the thing, come home. It's just not a lot of material there. And I don't have the opportunity to actually sit down with the pros anymore. Never really had a chance to do so at the Mythic Championships or Pro Tours because the pros are too busy, similar to why I was talking about with inviting people on the podcast for tonight. It's too much. And so now I'm looking and I'm like, so I can do like a few vlogs a year that are like worthwhile. and I can do basically, maybe a couple rewinds a year. And I'm just like, when I made the channel, I did it under the idea that I was going to continue to do GP coverage because that unlocked vlogs in different cities with different crews and different stuff all the time. And it unlocked access to pros where I could actually sit down with them for a few hours. I had a bunch of them lined up even. And now I don't have any of that. And those were really the core of what I wanted to do with MTG Breakdown. So now it's just kind of on pause. So no, I mean, for now, unless things change dramatically in that way, I'm not going to be firing it back up because I just don't think it's worthwhile at this point. And yeah, I could definitely, I mean, it's crazy. I did a couple of those like YouTuber style videos where I like talked to the camera and talked about a subject, and they got tons of hits, like way more than my other stuff. I mean, one of them has like 100,000 something, hits on it. And, but I just feel like a little handcuffed with what I can do for those. And they really weren't at the core of what I wanted to do. And yeah, it is tempting to see like this could be successful. I should do this. But, I know how things work long term. And if you don't like doing it, if I don't like doing it, I just won't end up doing it for the long term. So that's kind of where it's at. Will says, what is your approach to teaching brand new players Magic? He says, I like the Brian DeMar's limited constructed idea, but even simpler with 5 monocolored 40-card decks. Yeah, I think that's totally fine as well. I like to try to get people up to speed on the rules by teaching them with basic decks. And then I know it sounds crazy, but I actually like to have them learn to play limited as quickly as possible. Because it's not as hard as you think to just like sit down and draft a deck. It is very hard to draft a very good deck and to understand all the nuance. But, once you get it down to 2 colors, you usually only have 3 or 4 choices at max in a pack, and you can just pick the one that you like the most or the rarest one or the coolest one or whatever. And because limited teaches you everything, right? It teaches you how to pick cards from a bigger pool, which you need to do in Constructed. It teaches you how to build a mana base, which you need to do in Constructed. It teaches you how to cut cards from your deck, which you need to do in Constructed, because you always have all these extra options, right? And it teaches you how to play the actual games as well in a variety of different ways. Sometimes you end up playing out a control-y matchup. Sometimes you end up playing mid-range or aggro or whatever. And to me, that gives you the way to learn the fundamentals of all of it. If you can get over that initial hump of this is scary and I don't know how to do this. The other thing it does is it lets you just play on an even footing with the other players, where when you're a new player and you're trying to play Constructed and people are like, rare land, tap for rare 1-drop, go. And you're looking at your deck like, oh my God, I have like basics and a bunch of uncommons or whatever. It's hard to keep up with the Joneses in that scenario. And if you're playing limited, well, guess what? You're building up your collection while you do it. So that's what I try to push people that I think are gamers and are really kind of inclined to get into this stuff. Derek says, hey, Marshall, if you're not going to be covering so many GPs next year, will you consider making a return to competing at them? I will actually consider that. Before I started doing coverage, I was traveling to GPs, but it was just for like half a year there before I started doing coverage and then switched my focus to that. And while my focus will still stay on that, if I feel like there's some fun limited GPs or some cool formats that I could get out to and actually battle a little bit, I will. Especially if I can get my travel down a little bit less, because the idea of traveling out to a Magic tournament when I don't have to, when I travel to so many of them, is just not appealing. But if my travel's down, I could do it. So yeah, maybe I'll see you out there, Derek. Joe says, how do you feel about the recent changes to Magic organized play, both how they affect you personally and how they affect the future of the game? I like the direction. They introduced a lot of things that fixed a lot of the issues that we saw. The prior year, we had the MPL, the Magic Pro League, and then there was nothing below it for professional players. So it's like you either were in the MPL, you made a bunch of money, and you were like a real full-time Magic Pro, or you were nothing. Now we have the Rivals League, which is a place where if you're in the MPL, you fall down to that before you fall out entirely. And it's a thing that you can actually aim for. And even though it's still extremely difficult and extremely top-heavy, I like the idea that if you're in Rivals or MPL, if you're in MPL, you just have a straight up job and you're doing pretty good. If you are in Rivals, you are roughly at what Platinum was in the prior thing, which was the highest level. So you probably need to supplement your income with some content or some other stuff, but you're getting a pretty good deal there. And you can really leverage it into streaming and all this other stuff. So I really like the direction that they took that stuff. I am curious to see how separating out the tabletop from the arena stuff so much went. And then the other thing that comes up all the time are the invitational slots, the discretionary invites. And after the past year and seeing kind of how they've played out, I don't love them. I think I would try a different approach going into the next year. Basically, the idea behind them is, that if there's an underrepresented group in our community and we want to try to highlight them and give them a chance so that we can, other people can see them playing and say, hey, I want to be just like that person and I'm going to go after it. And I think that has some logic to it. The issue that I've seen though is that they've chosen people, personalities and stuff in the community to play in the highest level events for the highest prize pools against some of the best players in the world. And when I look at that, I think, okay, this is a cool opportunity, but it feels a little bit arbitrary, right? Like nobody knows how you get picked. It's just like you just get picked, right? And it's like there's no system to it. Fine, that's fair enough. It's Wizards' prerogative. It's their tournaments, but it needs to then serve the role, serve the purpose that they're trying to have it serve, meaning it needs to get exposure and that kind of thing for the people that you're picking. And that has not happened that much. For the most part, they get killed by these people that are full-time professional Magic players, and you don't even get to see them that much. So it's kind of like, well, we're not really getting anything great out of it, and it causes this controversy, which I think has some merit to it at least. Every single time it pops up on social media, whenever they announce whoever it is that end up getting the things, there's a lot of feel bad associated with it. Because on one hand, there's just some people that are just absolute jerks, right? And they'll just like be mean to the people that got invited, which is obviously completely out of line. Like anybody would take that invite. Come on. But then there's also people that are being more reasonable and saying, here's the reasons why I don't like these invites. But then if you're one of the people that got invited and you read that, you still kind of feel like, well, why am I getting bashed here? Even if it's not specifically at you. And it's hard not to feel that way. But then the other people are like, but I need to be able to speak my opinion. And it's just like everybody feels bad. Right. And like, that's not a good situation either. Going back to the last Mythic Championship, and we'll see if it changes. I mean, it's not a big sample size, but the last one, the top 8 was 6 MPL members, a Hall of Famer, and a Pro Tour champion. That's who made the top 8 of this thing, right? It wasn't streamers or whatever. And, they weren't getting that exposure. And to me, I want to see if we're going to put a program into place to try to, up the observance and to help this problem out. I want to see results too, right? I don't want to just see the gesture. I want to know that this is actually doing something to help along those lines. And while I do think that this helps to some point, I feel like it could be more efficient and we could get these, I want to see these people on camera. I want to watch them play. I want to know their personalities, right? I don't want to throw them into the lion's den necessarily. Now, I could be proven wrong in the sense that our sample size is small. And if some people spike, right, a streamer makes the top 8 or something, it would be a huge story. And I mean, I'd love to see it. Like I always find myself rooting for the underdogs. The people that haven't been playing for 20 years or aren't like full-time professional players. They're more like personalities or serious players or whatever. So yeah, there's a lot going on with organized play and how it's affected everything, going forward. I hope to see this next year really kind of shake things out where we get a more solidified flow for the competitive scene and where we kind of see a more focused, actionable way to solve some of the problems that we have with competitive Magic as well that'll yield better results. James says, do you still play your Animar Commander deck? If so, any new additions? No, I haven't. I do technically still have it. I've pilfered a few of the cards from my Canadian Highlander deck, and I definitely still have the Animar that I did the Ultra on. But I haven't played it in a really long time. I don't know. Maybe it's time to give Commander another go. Andrew says, hi, Marshall. Do you have any predictions on reprints in the upcoming returns to Theros and Zendikar? Do you have particular cards you'd like to see return? Not really. For Theros, I did like the, what was that stupid mechanic called? Bestow. I did like that mechanic. I don't know that I'd want to see it come back. It was a very awkward rules-based mechanic. It played totally fine, but the corner cases got very strange, and it was like, well, what happens? And you had to just sort of explain it to people a bunch of times because it wasn't super intuitive. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, I'd love to see Landfall back in Zendikar. Landfall to me is one of the cleanest, best mechanics they've made in a long time, mainly because it's easy to understand. And I loved it that if you had something with Landfall out, when you got to the middle or late part of the game, that even if you top decked a land, which normally feels really bad, you at least got some temporary bonus out of it. So it kind of meant like anything you drew was relevant, and I like that a lot. So I do hope to see those, but no specific cards. Joey says several drafters at my LGS really prioritize hate drafting, aka taking cards they don't plan on playing, but don't want to play against. They often think they're being next level sneaky by doing this. Even early in the draft, they'll proclaim, "I don't want to play against that," as they hate draft away. At that point, I feel like they are just not in the deck they should be in. I personally think hate drafting doesn't solve anything, as you're probably passing up on playables for your deck. Am I wrong? You are not wrong, Joey. You are absolutely correct. Hate drafting from a logical perspective makes almost zero sense. You are unlikely to play against the player that ends up with the card. And in order for it to punish you, they actually have to draw the card that you hate drafted. It is very unlikely that that will happen. And I use hate drafting very sparingly. I go way down the list. If a card has any chance of making my deck, I'll take it. I take any sideboard card easily over hate drafting. It does not hold up under logic to hate draft. Now, if there's just nothing in the pack for you, sure, take the best card. That's fine. That does make sense. But the moment you find yourself taking a card from the rest of the table over a card that you could actually put in your deck, you have made a very big mistake. Your win percentage is going down much more than it's going up. Paul says, "You're into watches. What's your Grail watch?" And he even explains it. I know what Grail watch means, but in case anybody doesn't, it's the watch you hope to one day be able to afford. My Grail watch, Paul, is a FP Journe Chronomet Resonance. And this is such a cool watch. I'll watch geek out for just a minute here, but the movement, the part that actually runs the watch, is really cool. There's like a physical principle. I don't actually know what a law. I don't know if it's a law, but whatever. There's a phenomenon called resonance, right? Where if two objects that are like moving or oscillating or going back and forth are attached to the same thing, they will sync up. You'll see this in houses and stuff where like there's something attached to a beam and another thing's attached to it, and they'll actually resonate. They'll sync up so that they go back and forth. And my favorite watchmaker's name is FP Journe. He's a French guy that makes these beautiful watches, and he came up with this idea of the key part of the watch that actually keeps time is called the balance wheel. It's a little thing that you see going back and forth if you ever looked at the inside of a watch before. He came up with a watch that has two of them, and they're right next to each other. And the idea is that they're close enough together and attached, to a similar thing that they actually start to resonate at this. So they sync up with each other. And then the idea being, if one of them were to start to get a little slower or get a little too fast, right, the other one would kind of pull it back in, and they would work with each other to stay in sync and therefore stay more accurate. Now, the horological, there's a debate as to whether that's actually relevant to accuracy's sake. And it's really hard to measure that kind of thing, but I think it's so cool. And it's gorgeous too. I love the design, and you can flip the watch over and see that movement in the back, and it's just beautiful. So that is one that I'd love to be able to afford one day, though I probably won't. Joey says, "Marshall, what do you think of the state of Limited's popularity? I've not done a physical paper draft in years, and most of the time I bring it up at the local game store, people look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. With Wizards recently confirming that Commander seems to be the most popular Magic format, why do you think Limited has fallen out of favor as Magic's preferred format? What do you think has to be done?" Well, it's interesting because to me, Limited has always had not the hugest following, but a very dedicated following. And I think our podcast is a perfect example of that. And when you look at LR, we're really a niche podcast in a niche game, in a game. I mean, we're really far down there, but we got big. I mean, this podcast, serves a lot of people every week, and the set reviews are big. And, you wouldn't think that it would be able to get like that for Limited. And now part of it is because Luis and I do talk about more broad subjects. We're not, a lot of our stuff's applicable to outside of Magic. And I know plenty of people listen to just hear the strategic stuff and aren't quite as into limited. But for the reasons I mentioned before, I think limited is the best way to play Magic. It teaches you all aspects of it, and it doesn't have that one-upmanship that you need where you're like spending all this money to buy these cards. You can build up a collection and then turn that into a deck. And, the varied gameplay, the fact that it changes every time, the fact that you get to just see more cards in different ways are such strong things that anybody who really gives it a shot usually gets hooked, and then they're just drafting all the time. I hope that, I haven't seen anything concrete that leads me to think that Wizards is going to go away from it. And I totally get why Commander is the most popular. It should be, right? Like that makes sense to me. That's a deck that you could just keep forever. It never rotates out. You never have to put any more money into the thing. Of course, it's the most popular format. It's kind of how people envision Magic to be. I have my deck. It's my deck of Magic cards. When the new set comes out, I might buy a few, maybe some singles or a few packs. I might find something to add to my deck. I might not. And then I'll just wait and do it again. With limited, it's work, right? You have to listen to the show. Like we've hopefully made it easier for people by doing the set reviews and stuff where you can kind of pop in and get an idea of what's going on with the set rather than feeling like you have to start from scratch every single time. But it's so fun to figure out new sets, right? That's what everybody loves, right? Everybody listening is like, what do you mean? I love it when a new set comes out. And of course, that's how I am too. So I'm not really worried about it. I think the product sells itself, but I do hope that it gets prioritized a little bit more on Arena where we see the 8 human player drafts, because I think that's what really showcases the format. Matthew says, hi, Marsh. First off, thanks for introducing me to process-oriented thinking. I try to apply these principles as a high school teacher every day. That's fantastic, Matthew. I love hearing that. What are some mechanics that you'd like to see return in an upcoming set that haven't been printed for the last 5 or 6 years, other than Flashback? And you are keen, Matthew, because Flashback would be one I'd love to see. Some of the other ones I'd love to see, Morph. I did not like Morph when I first saw it because it's weird and it doesn't really make sense. And it's like, what is going on? But I love how it actually plays out. So I'd love to see Morph come back. What other ones would I like to see? I mentioned a couple of them like Landfall and stuff. I do love those. One that's also just super weird, but I love the way it plays too is Evoke. I love putting those things on creatures. I love the idea that the creature ends up in the yard so you can bring it back and all the cool stuff that you can do with that. So I'd love to see that one. And then whatever, man, I'd love to see Flashback. I love Flashback. Max says, it seems like coverage starts pretty early in the day and goes until pretty late at night, especially in the first 2 days. I've been wondering, how do you guys eat and sleep and everything? Sometimes everybody looks a bit tired in the morning, day 2 and 3. Yeah, you're not wrong, Max. That is, everything you said is true. For example, right now it's 10:41 p.m. I've got, I don't know, eight more questions or so to go on the podcast, and then I'm going to edit and put it up. I have to be in the lobby of the hotel at 7 a.m. And then we go over and get prepped for the show where we go through hair and makeup and all the other stuff that we have to do. So you are right. When you see, and especially at the paper tournaments, our days are usually about 11, sometimes 12 hours long. So it is really hard to take care of yourself. Thankfully, Wizards takes good care of us. They cater our meals, right? So they'll bring food in so that we can eat lunch and sometimes dinner, depending. And then this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before about taking care of yourself. I go to bed now. I sometimes have a hard time actually falling asleep, but I'm heading into bed as soon as I can to try to get as much sleep as possible, because you really have to. And if we look tired on air, it's because we're tired. It is really easily the toughest job I've ever had. Easily. I am so tired after doing these, and we've kind of worked to get the schedule better and better as we've gone. But yeah, everything you noted, Max, very true. JP says, what do you anticipate a Commander Legends draft would look like? How will they work in availability of legendary creatures, availability of cards in your color identity, etc., alongside the traditional draft experience? No idea. I've talked about this type of stuff with friends and before. There's a few ways you could do it. You could give people default commanders in various color pairs that they could always default to. You could make them draft the commanders where they have to commit to that early, but there's always 2 commanders in every pack or whatever. So, basically what that means is you can either pick one of the first 2, or you'll guarantee to at least get past 1. So you have 2 different picks or 3 shots, if you will. at getting a commander and then take it from there. But otherwise, I have no idea. I mean, Luis would have to answer that because he's the game designer of us. Jaeger says, "Hey, Marshall, what's new in basketball for you? Have you been playing lately? I look forward to meeting you on the court again and winning." Jaeger. Hello, my friend. I mentioned the basketball league that I'm in. So is he. It was really cool. We played a game, and in fact, he was guarding me, and he was a pain. He was slowing me down and getting in my way and stuff. And then afterwards, he's like, "Hey, I'm a patron." I was like, "Oh, hey, man." And we had a nice little chat. And Jaeger, actually, I did see you at another game, but you were actually playing it, so I didn't get a chance to say hi. But I'm still playing. Things are good. I play on Thursdays. I play in the league on Tuesdays, and then I play in a Saturday pickup game as well. And, it's been kind of weird. Our league actually had a really good run for a while, and now we've been like off of our game, and I fell off of my game by a lot. We actually won our last game. So I was really happy about that, but I did a lot of the little things, but my shot wasn't really going, and that always makes me feel kind of bad, but I was able to adjust and still make it good. But anyway, it was great to see you, Jaeger, and I hope to see you again in another game soon. It was really cool to meet somebody, in the Magic community, in a totally different world, right? Like my basketball game, and all of a sudden I'm talking Magic with Jaeger is really cool. Next one comes from Rebecca, who says, "Any plans to do a show on drafting the mystery packs?" Ooh, I took my son, 14, and 2 of his friends to the Magic Fest in Richmond, and we did 1 draft and 1 sealed with the mystery packs. It was a blast, but if I go again, I'd love to be a bit more prepared. Also, I'd love to see events for parent-child teams. Do you know if those have ever been held? Especially, I would like to play another mom just once. Oh, I love that idea, Rebecca. I've never seen anything like that. I have definitely seen a lot of parent-child combos in Two-Headed Giant or things like that. I've never seen a whole event for it. My guess is that they would be worried about filling it out when they could just fill it in with like a regular Two-Headed Giant and just, sell more seats. You know how it is at those tournaments. The tournament organizers are always trying to maximize the space. That's like a big thing for them. So I haven't seen that. But that would be super cool. If you had the mom mirror match, Rebecca, that would be awesome. And then, the show on the mystery packs. Luis and I talked about it briefly when they first came out, but it's one of those things where like, I don't really have a great feel for how big of a portion of our audience are actually going to be able to draft these things. Excuse me. I guess this is what happens when I do the show alone. But, there are these special packs that Wizards came out with, and they've got these exclusive extra cards at the tournaments, and I think you're going to be able to buy them regularly too. And it is sweet. And then the set has like over 1,000 cards in it or something. So it's completely crazy. And it is awesome though. The decks that I've seen have been great. I got a chance to draft it once, and I drafted a sweet, you're never going to believe this. I drafted a sweet Gruul deck. This guy right here. I drafted a Gruul deck that was sweet. Like I had like literal FTK in it, and I had 2 other sort of Flametongue Kavu for you non-old school players. And I had, I can't remember what they were called either, but a few more kind of enters the battlefield, kill somethings, and it was great. I don't know how to approach it. We obviously, we joked around about doing a card by card set review on 1,000 cards. That doesn't really make sense. I got to see how. Basically, I don't want to do a primer even on a set that the vast majority of our audience might never get to draft. But if it is available in a way that we think that it's worth it and that a lot of the audience will, then we'll do it. We'll probably do it on a primer basis, by the way, Rebecca, like a breaking down the archetype and sort of the big pictures on how the set works rather than a card by card. Jordan says, "Hey, Marshall, why did you quit poker? Was it because you found that Magic was a more satisfying game and you'd rather dedicate your time to it instead? Circumstantial. As someone who juggles both games in my life, I'd love to hear your opinion." As I mentioned before, Jordan, I did it for time reasons. Basically, I found that I could dedicate more time to content creation, this podcast, at the time, the YouTube channel, that kind of stuff. And that was not only more fulfilling and made me happier than playing poker did, I felt like it had a better potential to be a use for my time that I was overall better for me on every metric. So that's why. And then, as I mentioned before, going back to play poker, I don't know, for fun or for more recreationally hasn't really appealed to me that much because my mentality is still very much like a professional's mentality. And that means that it's work, right? And it's like, well, if I have time off, I should probably, try to enjoy it a little bit of it. Not my strong suit. I mean, I enjoy my time, but it's hard to juggle these things when you don't really have a set schedule and that kind of stuff. Nicholas says, you're a big fan of Cube. That's right, I am. Which form is your favorite? Vintage, Legacy, or something else? If you could cut a card or two from a typical Cube, what would it be and why? My favorite of the powered cubes is Legacy. I like it better than Vintage Cube. My reasoning for that is I don't like the Moxen. Yeah. I know that's controversial because I think they're really cool cards, but I don't like it when I open up a Mox and I feel compelled to take it. I know that sounds weird, but it's once you've played with them a bunch, the nostalgia and the, oh my God, it's a Mox factor goes down a bit. And it kind of becomes another card where you're like, well, what could I do with this? Because that's what's exciting about Cube is like you get to do crazy stuff, right? And when I look at a Mox, I mean, it's a land, right? It's a land that you can play as many as you want in a turn. So that to me is very, very powerful. It's not that exciting or fun. It's just like, oh, I got a fast swamp. Ooh, it's a swamp I can play with another swamp, but I feel compelled to first pick them because of how powerful they are and some of the busted stuff that they can lead to. But again, I like interesting first picks or exciting first picks, and I don't find Moxen to be either of those. They're kind of no-brainers, and they're not really fun or interesting cards. They're just like, hey, it's a resource that I have more of now. So those, I wouldn't cut them from a Vintage Cube to answer your second question. I just don't like them that much for that reason. So I like Legacy Cube for powered, and I like Commons and Uncommons Cube for others, which I really, really enjoy. I love, anytime Mulldrifter is like the best card, I'm in. If I could cut cards, the kind that we talked about earlier, I would definitely cut. There's also some obscure cards that always seem to make their way into Cube, and I don't really understand why people do. There's also some old school cards that people just sort of cling to. And I'm like, okay, look, if you have nostalgia for this card and it makes you happy, go for it. But, I wouldn't put a lot of them in. Cards that just sort of have stuck around forever. I like cards that make stories or do big kind of exciting things, to be more of the highlight for a cube. Looks like I got one more question from Johan who says, what is the story of Nubbin the cat? Is she your first pet? Nubbin is, I share it with my girlfriend, or like I said, we're kind of working stuff out right now, but her and I, it was her cat. But I mean, it's basically our cat, and she goes back and forth between her and I now, but Nubbin unfortunately has had some very serious health issues this year. It's been really stressful. But we call her the miracle cat because she survived something that she really shouldn't have survived twice now, and is actually doing quite well. But this thing is likely to come back because it's linked to a heart condition, which creates a set of circumstances that will likely have this happen again. So we're kind of in this mode where we're like worried about her all the time, but also really happy that we still get to spend time with her because she's really just the best cat. Yeah, I love that cat more than anything. And she's not my first pet, but she's kind of my first pet, like on my own as an adult, even though, like I said, she's not actually, mine per se. But yeah, best cat in the world. I love that cat. Next question from Johan is, other than Arnold Palmer's, what's your favorite drink, beer, wine, or whiskey? None of those. It's interesting. Going back to what we were talking about with caffeine and stuff, alcohol in general has never tasted good to me ever, and it still doesn't. And again, I hear you saying it's an acquired taste and you get used to it. I haven't, and I've drank it before. Also, I had a weird thing that happened when I was, I don't know, I think I was in my early mid-20s or something. I thought about it and I realized that drinking, I didn't really like it. I just didn't like it. Like, I didn't really get much out of it. I felt like, if I ever drank too much and I got a hangover, it was really miserable. Like, not the kind of thing where it's like, oh, fun, I have a headache, haha, let's go get breakfast. It was like, I was like, really felt awful. And at some point I was like, maybe I don't really like drinking that much. And so I kind of made a rule for myself at that point where I said, instead of just assuming that you're going to drink, like when you're out with friends or whatever, if somebody offers you one, just ask yourself, do you want to? Like, just point blank right now, do you want to have a drink or not? And it turns out that 999 out of 1,000 times my answer is no. I just never really feel like it. I don't have an urge for it. I don't like it. I also don't think it's particularly healthy or a good habit. There's been a bunch of people in my family that have problems with alcoholism historically. And that kind of, I know that some of that stuff can get, you can get that from other people, in your family. You can, what is it called? It's hereditary or whatever. And I've never had any issues with it, so I'm probably not like super disposed to that kind of behavior or whatever. But also I'm just like, I don't really like it. It's okay. And I'm also lucky because I know a lot of people will drink alcohol so that they can like loosen up and have a good time and stuff. And when it comes to social settings, I'm usually fine. Like I can be kind of shy a little, but for the most part, I can talk to people. I don't get really like anxious about those things where I feel like I need to have something to loosen me up. If I'm comfortable, I'm good to go and it's fine. So I don't really get that part out of it either. So at this point, I don't drink. But it's weird because when I talk to people about it, they say, well, he doesn't drink or you don't drink. And it's like, well, it's not like I have a rule. Like I don't not drink. It's not like I'm like, well, no, I don't drink. It's just like, I just don't end up ever actually doing it. And I don't really enjoy it. So I don't know. I guess I'm just not a drinker. And that's just kind of how it's been. I do sometimes wish that I was a little more into it just because I see people really enjoy wines or whiskeys as like an occasional thing that they really get a lot of enjoyment out of, like the hobby or the flavor, the kind of experience of it. But I just have never really been able to get on board with it. So I'm just not a drinker. I don't think I ever will be. And then last question from Johan says, since you travel a lot, you must watch a lot of movies. What's your favorite? Keep up the great content. Thanks, Johan. And you are completely correct. I actually take an iPad mini with me on every flight that I go on because I don't want to be subject to only being able to watch the stuff that the airline provides, or, sometimes they don't even have it. And so I fill it up with movies, and I do. That's the time when I watch movies, because when I'm at home, I don't watch TV very much. Like there's a few shows that I've gotten into, but really just like the super good stuff. I don't just randomly watch television. I mean, I walked into my living room the other day and I turned on my TV and I realized I hadn't turned it on in like 3 months. Like I just, for any reason, I'm just more of a computer person. But when it comes to movies, some of my favorite movies off the top of my head, that I watch a lot, I do like to watch the same movies over and over. Silence of the Lambs is probably my favorite movie. There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men. I've been watching some older movies that like I didn't really watch when they came out because I was kind of too young to really appreciate them, but I've gone back to them. Like a movie I really like to watch is A Few Good Men. Man, that's a sweet movie that like I kind of knew the iconic lines from it because everybody knows, you can't handle the truth or whatever. But I didn't really, I had never watched it like as an adult. I don't even think I watched it as a kid. I just seen like random scenes from it. And now I just really like it. Like it's just a movie that I like to revisit and watch. Other movies, I like a lot of the stuff that a lot of people like. Well, like, I like Star Wars or whatever. And I like, Lord of the Rings and kind of like the big trilogy stuff. I like a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies. I tend to like suspenseful, gritty, kind of hardcore, like sometimes even depressing, you would say, movies that kind of make you think or whatever, or kind of take you on a journey. Those are the movies that I tend to go back to over and over and really kind of click with. So those are the ones that I like. Okay, we're going to stop it right there because that's the last question. I wanted to say thanks to everybody for putting up with the fact that you've got to listen to me this whole entire show and no Luis, but he'll be back. He, like I said, he just had kind of a urgent thing come up, but no big deal. And he'll be back next week. So thank you for that. I hope it was entertaining or useful to you in some way. I always feel a little weird about doing stuff like this. It just feels a little, I don't know. It's just a little exposing or feels a little weird, but I trust you. And, and like I said, hopefully, it was entertaining for you. If you want to find me on social media, I'm Marshall_LR. And I want to remind you the show is brought to you by channelfireball.com. If you want to sell your cards back to them, you can go to channelfireball.com/buy list. And if you do go there, you will find, that you can look up any card and see what they'll give you for it. If you want to trade it in for store credit, you'll get 30% bonus back as well, which is obviously sweet. And if you're not, you can, of course, just get cash for it. That's channelfireball.com/buy list. That will do it for this one. I'm not going to do a sign off. I don't want to step on Luis's gig. We'll just hope he has a sweet one for next week. But otherwise, see you then. Thanks for hanging out.